All right. Well, welcome everybody to the Advocacy at Work podcast. I am Tim McDonald, your host, and I am here today with a very special guest, Marielle McLeod. How are you doing, Marielle?
I am well, Tim. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for being here. I'm so excited we're doing this. I don't know if it'll be broadcast during Colorectal Cancer Awareness Month, but we are recording this in March, which is Colorectal Cancer Awareness Month, and both Marielle and I are impacted by colorectal cancers, and we're both huge advocates. So you can see we're both wearing blue today, and I think you were just on a news appearance on your local news channel this morning, right?
I was, yes.
That's amazing. So tell us a little bit about, like your advocacy and how you got involved and why.
So my advocacy is very broad, and I kind of say it that way just because it goes above and beyond just the normal advocacy of talking about colorectal cancer screening and awareness. I do a great deal of advocacy for the Latino community, making sure that we have access not only to screening, but culturally appropriate and health literacy appropriate education in regards to colorectal cancer and what that is. We have a lot of stigmas within our community, as you can imagine, culturally, to where we don't talk about things like these. So oftentimes, as Latino patients, we're diagnosed automatically at later stages. And we don't really talk about our family history, just like many other cultures. So just being able to have these open discussions is a lot that goes into my advocacy as well, in addition to clinical trial enrollment. Yeah.
That's amazing. And I am really interested to explore some of these stigmas because I think it's something that most people are not aware of, unless if you come from one of these cultural backgrounds that has it, you don't really know that it exists. And so, can you just explain a little bit about like what some of these are and how you're working to overcome those with your advocacy?
Absolutely. One of the things that I feel that is working in my personal advocacy is I'm a young adult. So having the opportunity to connect with peers my age within this community is absolutely wonderful because we understand the importance of just having these open discussions. Our parents, on the other hand, that fit into that older demographic, there are a lot of taboos, like we don't talk about our private parts. And definitely, anything that has to do with the nether regions, whether it's colorectal cancer or sexual intimacy or anything like that. So we kind of keep those things and concerns very close to our chest. But in addition to that, we don't like to discuss like our poop, just like a lot of people do. But it's even more so that it's really, really gross. And we just like suffer in silence because we don't have anyone that we can kind of go to. And being able to find the courage to go to our medical provider and say, like this is really happening to me takes a lot, particularly within our community. So I know it's very similar to, just a regular, normal Anglo-Saxon community, African Americans, but it's very heavily hit when we don't really talk about the things that are of the utmost importance that can really save our lives.
Yeah, it was, I mean, not to sidetrack this a little bit, but I was on the way home from my book signing party last night with my wife, and we were talking because her boss, who's also her friend, was there taking photographs for me, and she was talking about how she got her to go to her doctor to, because she was wondering, didn't go to the doctor too often to take care of some stuff, and we were talking about pap smears, and her doctor wanted to do one when she was in the office, and she said, "Oh no, I'm not ready for that," and I'm like, well, how can you not be ready for it? And she got into the whole thing, and I was like, oh, okay. I didn't realize that was a thing because I'm a guy and I don't know.
Yeah, so absolutely. Yeah, but it's so funny too because it's like, who would have thought that in our advocacy we'd be doing so many conversations in regards to butts and poop and colonoscopy prep, that now it's like in the beginning people are like, oh my God, were you talking about that? And now it's just second language to us, and we're just we'll talk to everybody. I get made fun of, particularly with my staff, because I love talking about colonoscopy prep, and I get so excited when I know that somebody's having a colonoscopy. I'm like, oh my gosh, please let me help you, and I become like their biggest hype girl, while also getting that side eye look if it's like, are you okay? Like, why are you so excited about this? And I'm just like, it's what I do. So
I love that. I always I think especially with my guy friends on Facebook, when I see them dreading and talking about how horrible the prep is for a colonoscopy, I just remind them that it's a lot better than doing it every 2 weeks when you're going through chemo.
Absolutely. I'm telling you. And then, there's always that nap that we always talk about.
The best
Like,
ever.
just have that nap almost every day. I would
I
just
know.
show up for one all the time. Like, it's
I
amazing.
tell people all the time, I never feel better than after I wake up from a colonoscopy.
Yeah, I get real upset. I got really upset with my husband last time. I went in January, and I was like, when I finally woke up, I was like, can you let me sleep longer? He was like, the doctor let you sleep for an extra 30 minutes. I'm like, we have to go. I'm like, oh, I'm like, okay, fine. I'm like, we can go.
Okay. Well, let me get back to what we were actually talking about. So you did talk about some of the the things that
Yeah.
you guys don't talk about. How are you working to actually break those barriers down? And I know one obviously is you actually talking about them, but that you talking about them is a little bit different than getting other people to talk about them.
Absolutely. We do have a lot of work in making sure that we provide a comfortable space to have these discussions, regardless of what language we're doing it in. We are discussing a lot of very intimate details and information. So just making sure that the community, regardless of race, that we're trying to educate, has an understanding, not just of how we're explaining the information to them, but they can also pick that education component up and share it with others. So making sure that the materials that we provide at our certain register that are digestible, not just to those individuals that we're sharing them with, but whomever they want to share that information with can also process it, but become very confident in their abilities to understand it so they can go to their provider and feel empowered to ask these very important questions that can save their lives, especially regarding to the signs and symptoms of it. Additionally, being able to have a conversation in regards to how, if they are diagnosed with colorectal cancer, like what their treatments options are and what that looks like for them, regardless of age or access or ability to coverage. And then in addition to better understanding clinical trial options, like what do you need to know? Biomarker education is something that I love having with our community because it is very important. One of one of the very minute but very important pieces of information that you need to know in order to be able to access a clinical trial, making sure that you qualify for that. So just empowering them with the information that is so daunting to us, even normal English speaking people, to be able to have the confidence to be your own best advocate on how to find your voice and be able to potentially not just save your life, but also that of a loved one or a friend or even a complete stranger.
Yeah, it's so I was just reflecting as you were talking and I'm just nodding in agreement. And then I thought to when I was first diagnosed and how overwhelming all this information was. And like, if you would have asked me what a biomarker was when I was first diagnosed, I would have had to ask you, like, what are you talking about? I have no idea. And so, I think it's so important. And I know both of us understand, but just so everybody understands who's watching, why are knowing your biomarkers so important?
Because they will determine the kind of treatment that you will receive and how you will end up definitely responding to it. I want to add into what you just said. Even with my healthcare background, I've been in healthcare on it, patient facing and not for like over 20 years now. And even with the knowledge that I had when I became the patient, it all completely flew out the window. It was just as though I had no clue what you were talking about, but particularly in regards to biomarkers, it wasn't until I finished treatment and stepped into the advocacy space that I started learning more about it, and that I went and asked my doctor. I was like, hey, I just want to know, like, what are my biomarkers at this follow-up oncology appointment? And they're like, why do you need to know that? I said, it's important for me to know that. And long story short, I found out that I was MSS. There's like no clinical trials. There's some now, but I'm like, well, I'm glad that that wasn't a factor in my treatment back then, because it's like, what would I've done?
Yeah.
Had that been, what they were going to be putting me, like being a determining factor as to what my treatment was going to look like. So it's very important to know what your biomarkers are, because it definitely will curtail your education and let you know what kind of treatments will work best for you.
No, absolutely. And I mean, I know it now, but I mean, even like 6 months in, I was asking if there was, as I was exploring all these different treatment paths and everything, because I didn't want to accept my fate that I was given, and asked, like, they told me like, oh yeah, you're MSS and you're this and you're that. And I'm like, okay, great. And then I asked about immunotherapy, and they're like, no, you're not eligible for that right now, but that doesn't mean down the road, we can explore it like later. And I'm like, but nobody explained why,
Yeah.
it's all just
Yeah.
the facts. And I'm like, but now knowing all what I know,
Yes.
like, as you just described, MSS patients typically are not eligible for too many immunotherapies. Now that is changing, as you just mentioned. We are getting there, but it's still not as prevalent if you're MSS or MSI and not MSS. And so it's just all these things that are like, so important to understand. And it really does get into the very specifics of personalizing the treatment to you and not just giving you what everybody else gets. Yes, there are some common chemotherapies that are available that most people get, but there's still like that. Knowing what it is really helps the oncologist inform what kind of treatment will work best for you. So that's why they're so important.
I'm so proud of you for asking about, immunotherapy and all of that when you went into an appointment with your provider. When I stepped in to find out what my fate was after surgery, to figure out what my staging and next steps were, I had no idea that I was stage 3 yet. I literally walked in the door and my oncologist looked at me and he said, don't ask about a clinical trial. That's not an option for you. And it blindsided me because I was like, where did that come from? I was like, that was so far from my mind. I was just like, I just want to know what's going to happen to me. Like, let's go. And now that I know more about clinical trials and my biomarkers and all of that, yes, I understand why that was his response at that time. But if I already had like this running list in my head of trials that were an option that I spend so much time studying, I would have felt very defeated if he was like, just shut me down from the beginning. I was like, oh, but I'm happy that you chose like to come in guns a-blazing. That's pretty awesome to me.
Well, it didn't feel like that at the time.
I know.
It felt like I was the novice kid in school and trying to learn as much as I could and as quick as I could, and but not fully comprehending how all these pieces fit together yet. So
I love how drastically our education changes, right? As we progress, not just as patients, but we step into the advocacy space, we become these like huge sponges. And it's like, okay, now I have all this lived experience, and now I have all of this additional colorectal cancer education and knowledge, like, and treatment and all of that. It's like, how do you combine the both and then end up to where we are? So it's pretty neat to see.
Yeah, and this brings up something that I meant to ask you right away, and I forgot. But it's a good point to ask it. Like, how do you define advocacy? Because I think it's so important for people to understand and get a frame of reference for. But I think it's also important, as you just brought up, it's like, it's what we do with the advocacy once we understand what it is, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I feel that advocacy is a little bit different per individual. So for me, advocacy is helping others find their voice, empowering them to champion for others. That looks a little bit different. Some of us are really great in policy. Some of us are great in clinical trial research and development. Some of us do really great in community settings, advocating for various things. So there's not a one size fits all. But in order for you to become a patient advocate, there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes that others are not open to it or exposed. Like, we do all this hard work, and I've loved seeing you like with your book and this advocate, like following those last few years, because it's true what you say. We have to like dig our way up this like very invisible mountain, not just to be like, whoa, I'm right here, but also it's like, what are we doing with these experiences that we use to empower others? But to someone, it's like, oh, I'm not a patient advocate because I'm not a patient. You can still be an advocate regardless of what your role is, because the intention behind it is definitely that driver for you. We're here to help others, not to elevate ourselves. It just happens that we become the face of whatever our soapbox is. That's how we get acknowledged. But we're not here. It's like, look what I did for myself. We're empowering others in a community that's above, greater than us. So it's like, that's one of the main things that I love about us that do advocacy, right? Yeah.
I absolutely love that, and certainly embody that myself. It's like, I never do this for me, but now that I'm like able to look back in retrospect, I actually just did some research earlier this week that shows like how patients with meaning and purpose have better outcomes than patients that don't.
Absolutely.
And so me getting involved in this early on in my diagnosis, I think was a huge benefit to me still being here, being able to talk to you today.
Yes. I agree with that 100%. When I was going through treatment, as you can imagine, there are days that you are very defeated. You can be the strongest person and have like the hardest mental health. Like it is hard, and you have to decide how you show up every single day, not just for yourself, but for others. And with your true intentions. I just kept asking, it's like, there has to be some purpose behind this. There has to be some purpose behind this. And then I found advocacy, and I was like, this is where I'm meant to be. Like, this is what I'm going to use all this experience for. So no, I agree with you. And you can tell the difference for those of us that do it for the greater good. You can certainly.
Oh yes, for sure. I kind of like to say, I used to say this in because I come from kind of a marketing background, and I was like always like, you could always tell the people doing it the right way and and the people doing it the wrong way. And I always said I had a good BS meter now.
Yes, I know, right? Sometimes I feel a little bit cynical when my BS meter kind of like goes on the upright, but I was like, no, like I see it coming. But no, I agree with you 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I really look at in the book, I kind of identified, and the book is obviously based upon my experience and talking with so many other advocates like yourself over the years. But one of the things that I've kind of like tried to identify to make it easier for people to comprehend is advocacy fitting into 4 different buckets. One being legislative, one being research, and I know you touched on the research one being fundraising, and then one being awareness. And I think a lot of it, from what I'm hearing from you, looks like you're, very well planted in the awareness piece, like helping other people understand what their powers are, what their opportunity for knowledge and education is. But I'm just kind of curious, as I say those 4, do you agree with that? Do you have any differences in that? Do you think my assessment of where I see you fitting in is accurate, or would
it is absolutely accurate. I do a little bit of everything, but I do majority in awareness. Last few years I've participated a lot more in clinical trial advocacy. I do that with SWOG and FDA and DoD and all that stuff. But the only one that I am not a fan of is the fundraising component of advocacy. Not because it's not my cup of tea. It has never been I'm just like, I am great at all of these things. Like, you need money, you tell me, I'll be your hype person. Like, I'll recruit people for you. But I was like, I can never put myself in that fundraising capacity. But your buckets are like very spot on. And that's, when I mentioned earlier, everyone doesn't have to be great at everything, but we all have our particular area of expertise that we do really, really well. But the fun thing about advocacy is that you can step in and out of those buckets per se and figure out what you like. Like, you don't have to commit to just one. There's opportunities sometimes where you can mix all of them, like, going and calling Congress. You don't have to be proficient in knowing all of the things about legislative work and all of that. We're grateful to have organizations such as those to kind of teach us the way and still have us use our experiences without being like full-fledged in the legislative arm. Which I think it's pretty neat, but awareness for sure.
And so, from the time you were diagnosed to, where you're at today, how, tell me a little bit about how you've seen your advocacy journey kind of evolve, or have you taken any of those, like get in and then get out of certain areas,
Yeah, my advocacy has changed tremendously in all of the great ways. Being almost 9 years out, I have found a great strength in my voice. Like, I am a lot more confident with not just how I share my story, but how I empower others. One thing that I don't like talking about myself, which I have to work in progress, but I love developing talent in others. That is something that I'm really great at. So when I find a particular advocate that is making their way and trying to find their voice in the landscape of advocacy, I love being able to connect and empower them and share other resources with them that I'm like, I think this will be something really wonderful for you, and just kind of seeing them grow from afar Sitting in the sidelines for the new generation of advocates has been completely wonderful. But I also find myself doing what I call harder things. Like, yes, awareness is wonderful, but how do I use that knowledge and apply it to being a clinical research advocate? Like, how do I empower others on the importance of participating in trials and properly speaking about them, and the importance of retention and participation? You know, and then connecting with other, like I do a lot of work with industry. I love being able to see and learn, understand how that works. So I am a queen, jack of all trades, but queen of none per se, just because I love to learn and I'm always evolving in my advocacy, which I think for us is extremely important because we're able to adapt and learn, you know, the up and coming treatments and be able to disseminate it amongst, you know, the communities that we serve, and empower others to do the same. And then I get to participate in wonderful activities with you that I'll get to see you again in a couple of weeks. So being able to have access to a lot more experiences has been something that I have not taken for granted, in my time as a patient advocate, for sure.
Yeah. So, you know, when obviously I hear clinical trials, I didn't go through any clinical trials, and I think I understand the angle that you help other patients with clinical trials, but immediately in my mind, because I do a lot of research advocacy, is I think of working with the drugs for clinical trials, their process of getting FDA approval. So how exactly are you working in advocacy on clinical trials?
Yeah, so what I do currently as a clinical trial research advocate is that we bring the patient voice into the various parts of clinical trial and design. So once a researcher develops a concept, like a new study, we will meet to make sure what PROs, like patient-reported outcomes, are going to be measured throughout, you know, the trial itself. What kind of benchmarks in regards to functionality and quality of life need to be met for, you know, again, for retention and keeping patients on trials as long as possible. But in addition to that, speaking up in regards to the toxicities of these treatments and the amount of times that a patient has to have specific blood work or labs, or the time that is going to take for them to travel, like bringing into consideration any kind of barriers and impairments that patients might have and face in order to not just qualify, but to actually be able to participate. One of the things that we champion a lot for is bringing a lot of trials into community centers, because as we all know, a great deal of patients are being treated at community centers that don't necessarily, by no fault of theirs, don't have access to travel to the large NCI centers where majority of these are. So that's one thing that we're currently championing for right now, including particularly those trials that follow the standard of care that you're already getting at your community. Once we're able to change kind of that mindset, I feel that we would see a large increase, particularly for the young onset population, to be able to be considered and like seen within that data, because the data is important.
Yes, no, very important. And I think that is so important. So I would actually say you're doing a little bit of research advocacy there too, because that is helping the pharmaceutical companies understand how to develop these trials that make it most effective to reach the people you want to reach.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
So, no, that it's so great. I could keep going on and talking with you, but I know we're getting close to the end. So I want to ask you a couple, I call this my lightning round. They have nothing to do with anything that we've just talked about, just fun facts. So just as quick as you can, just tell me what comes to your mind first. You don't need to, they're not deep questions or anything. So we'll start with the easy one. What's your favorite color?
Blue.
That's what I figured. That's what most of my colorectal cancer people say.
It's always been my favorite. So I'm like, oh, look at that. It was meant to be.
I was going to say, I've gone from orange to blue because I used to do a lot of work with No Kid Hungry and their color was orange. And so now I'm like, but orange and blue are my high school colors. So it's kind of like I have the best two favorite colors in the world.
Love it. Good colors. Good colors.
What's your favorite band or musician?
I was just asked this question. I don't have a favorite band or musician. I have various genres of music, depending on what mood I'm in, that I like to go to. I go from 90s to early 2000s hip hop, obviously, and then a lot of like Latin music, that just, it depends on the day. I switch it around with a mix of like 80s hair band. Literally, my friends will steal my playlist. Like when I'm working on, they're like, what are you listening to? I'm just like, it goes from like Korn to Daddy Yankee to then Boys to Men. And it's like, it's weird. It's just, it depends on what I'm feeling that day.
I was gonna say you surprised me when you said the 80s hair band.
I do. I'm an 80s kid, but it's like I love 80s music. You put them on, I'll start blaring out to them, and it's just, I think it's great music. I mean, come on now. It's good.
What's a place you've always wanted to visit but haven't yet?
I will say I really want to go to Cape Cod. It's on my list. I have traveled to quite a good bit of places, but stateside Cape Cod for sure. I want to go to Fiji. It's on my list too. So I'll let you know. I hope my husband will listen to this podcast and get something.
And then finally, what is one thing that most people don't know about you?
I'm loyal to a fault. To my friends, to my advocacy, like I am loyal to a fault. Yeah.
All right. Well, just one final question for you before we get done. What if you could do one big thing, like if resources were no issue, what would you like to do?
Eradicate oxaliplatin. I think we need a new treatment. If I could do, I would find an appropriate treatment for colorectal cancer that doesn't cause so much permanent damage to us to survive, for sure.
I'm all in favor of that.
Yes.
I'm still dealing with some things myself.
I know, that's why I'm like, as I'm sitting here, I'm like, it is so cold in my house. I can barely feel my fingertips right now. I'm like, whatever would improve quality of life for patients on treatment, off treatment term,
That's fantastic. So, and I'll you don't need to list anything out because I'll include it in the blog post about the podcast. But if people want to learn more about you or get in contact with you, what is the best way for them to do that?
Any social media platform, LinkedIn, Instagram. I go on Facebook quite a bit, but Instagram, so Instagram, LinkedIn would be the best way to get hold of me. If you see me down the street or an event, just please come find me. Like I love seeing people that, like how you and I met at the Colorectal Classic and have just stayed in touch. Those are the most wonderful connections that I've ever made. So
yes, I was going to say, I know I saw you last year. I think it was at the first tee when I went to go get my picture taken, and you were up there too. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's Marielle.
Absolutely. And then we kept running into each other. And then I love the fact that you're golf for one. And I have pictures, I have to send them to you, of you wearing his the Conquistador helmet. And I just thought it was amazing and wonderful. So every time I see those videos come up, it makes me feel so great because I'm like, we get to do it all again. So
I was going to say, I don't think I'm going to be able to top last year's experience.
I know, but there's always, wishful thinking. So,
and really the event is really about being around all the other advocates that are out there. So
absolutely. It's so great, like being able to find ways and opportunities to see one another. So I'll take them as they present themselves. Just, we're a great group of people. So I love having y'all as part of my life.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Marielle. I really do appreciate it. And thank you for being on the Advocacy Work podcast.
Thank you for having me, Tim. It's an absolute pleasure.